Okay, everybody, if we could take our seats and start. I will be perfectly honest. I've been having a difficult time and joking with Allison about how do I introduce Allison. And I've decided I'm not going to inflict the wonderful recording she did for us for Cloud Onyx. It's absolutely wonderful. I'll play it for you. She does a haiku. It's absolutely wonderful. But that's not the way we're going to start. Allison is probably at least 50% responsible for the success of Asterix, because everybody who has ever touched Asterix, and I think at this point free switch in most other systems, basically falls in love with Asterix the first time congratulations, you have successfully installed. And this is the point where everybody in the room suddenly has fallen madly in love with the sound of Allison's voice. Okay? Conveniently, there isn't the equivalent of, "What, you idiot? What did you think you were doing?" Although I could imagine you recording that.
I probably did.
And if you get a chance, you really need to listen to her zombie warning recordings and stuff like that.
Yes.
Those are out on the internet.
Yep.
So I would like you all to press 1 for Allison.
Thank you, Eric. Hi, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much for that introduction. That was great.
For Allison, press 1.
Yeah, exactly. So those of you who have attended my talks before at Astricon or IT Expo probably know that in this environment, I'm qualified to speak about one thing and one thing only, and that is IVR. So that is what I do pretty much every day, all day. IVR is my passion and it's my focus. And a few years ago, it became clear to me that my job is so much more than just recording IVR and sending it back to clients. More and more people are asking me for my opinion about how to use their IVR to its best advantage. So this presentation is all about how IVR in the 90s, and yes, I started to be involved in IVR in the late 90s for a company called TELUS, which is the big major telephony concern in Alberta, which is the province where I live in Canada. So yeah, it was the late 90s when I started doing their mobility platform and moved on. So yes, it has changed a great deal from its basic utility of directing callers and answering the phone. So when clients ask me for advice about how to better use their IVR, I'm so relieved when they ask me this. Unfortunately, I'm fairly downstream in the process. Most people have a script already written and just want me to record it. But when they ask my advice, I'm always trying to urge them to take their IVR to kind of the next level. So that's the whole gist of this. A few months ago, I had a client send me, or he gave me a call, and he was wanting to do an IVR, and he said, "I want to do more than the whole, for this, press that, for this, press that." He said, "It's so 90s." And the light bulb went off, and I said, "I'm totally stealing that for a presentation, that whole idea." So, yes, the 90s. They were a fantastic time. We all remember that. I don't think Dan Jenkins was alive during that time, but anyhow. We cannot do this limbo thing with current modern laptop computers, so it was, kind of a fun halcyon time. Back then, IVR had one job, and that was sorting. So the guys at TELUS, the developers at TELUS, they kept saying this word IVR, or this acronym IVR, and I actually had to say to them, what is that? I was such a kitten back then. And I remember the head developer wrote on the back of his business card, interactive voice response, and that's the first time I had ever heard that term. And he also explained it in an interesting way. He said that IVR is kind of like an escalator, which takes jackets of perhaps white and sorts those off to the left, and all the people in the red jackets go off to the right, and then all miscellaneous colors are pushed forward to be further sorted down the line. It's a fantastic way to explain the basic utility of IVR. It does sort. And, back then it was easy to parse. Really, it didn't need to be any more complicated than, for this option, press that. If it's this you want, press that. It had a better use of staff. So in other words, it wasn't one centralized receptionist who was fielding all calls and then using their judgment to sort the various factions. The caller sorts themselves into categories, and the commands were very, very basic and very easy. And the dream, at least, was less caller confusion, although I'll get into perhaps instances where IVRs deliberately trip up callers and do not set them up for success. The other thing the early IVRs were really good at doing was creating boredom. And so Martin, here is our opportunity to...
Thank you for calling. Your call is appreciated. Please listen to the entire menu as our menu options have changed. If you know your party's extension, please enter it now. For tech support, press 1. For accounting, press 2. For claims, press 3. For all other issues, press 0 or stay on the line.
It's not awful, but it just doesn't do anything at all. And I mean, I recorded that before I left for this trip. I know when I get home there's going to be scripts waiting for me that are no more imaginative than that. So it's pretty 90s. We've come a long way from those great big computers with the fat backs. We've stepped away from organizing people in cubicles literally and figuratively. So I am always pleading with clients that it's time to show some personality, and especially with your IVR. So let's take an inventory of what's outdated. And yes, on a daily basis, I still am asked to voice the prompt. Our fax number is, yes, those are still around, unfortunately. So an inventory of what's outdated. The awkward greeting. She looks like she's trying to fend him off. She probably is. So that is that greeting we just listened to. The blah, 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 blah. For this, press that. And especially at the end when they say, again, we're glad you've called. It's like, no, it's just so banal and so flat that anything that says, we're glad you've called, it comes across as being a little disingenuous. The other thing that's outdated is the commercial. So many people want to take their auto attendant opening greeting and pack it full of, you're nodding, pack it full of way too much information. This is verbatim for a client that I recorded for, and yes, they're a technology company and they're talking about their lightning fast turnaround system and how considerate they are of your time, and they understand that things are critical, and this takes about 1.5 minutes to play. So it's a little contradictory. And also, did you catch the following 12 options? No, sir. No, we do not do 12 options. So I always tell people to perhaps leave this for their on-hold system where you have time to fill, and then you can tell people about how awesome your company is. But do not front stack the opening greeting with that kind of pithy information. Pithy. Here's the other thing that's extremely outdated. Putting the caller to work, whether or not it is intentional or something that you've just done and you don't realize how labyrinthine the IVR is, how much of a maze it is. So this is a bit of an exaggeration. You press 2, confirming that you meant to press 1. Is that correct? It sounds a little bit extreme, but really, I do systems all the time in which there are checks and balances about, okay, you press this. I just want to make sure that you press that. Did you press that? Did you mean to press that? None of that needs to happen. The other thing that this kind of complicated IVR does is it's almost like a game the callers have to endure in order to get to live service, and it shouldn't be that way. So, and the other thing that I think needs to change is that people have a basic fear of being unconventional. They're afraid to use humor, and they're afraid to go a little bit outside the box in order to relate to their clients, because I think they're afraid that they'll offend some callers if they take a somewhat humorous or casual approach. H&R Block actually hired me through Digium to do all of their IVR this tax season. And they did a huge block of IVR from January right up till tax time, till mid-April. And it was fantastic because it was written in this extremely informal demeanor. So the messages in January were, you are so awesome to be organized and thinking about your taxes in January. You're a champion. And, it was very whimsical and very playful. They escalated in their level of urgency as it got closer to April 15th. So if people called, at late March, the messages were kind of like, okay, nobody panic. You still have time, but we need to, get going on this whole thing. So I personally love reading systems like that because there's some character to them. And people are really, really afraid to introduce that into their IVR. So the awkward greeting, the great big commercial, the maze or making clients or customers or callers work really hard, and this fear of being a little unusual or a little unique, I just kind of want it to go away completely. So the reality is greetings are either awkward and or too lengthy. Just kind of a little informal survey. How many prompts do people think an opening menu should have? What's the limit? 5? That's pretty good. Oh, I see a 1 over there. Yeah, definitely, Alan. Yeah, so 4, 5, around there, nothing over 5. People cannot remember any choices more than that. So, yes, they're too lengthy. IVR tends to be self-congratulatory. Again, that gets back to the huge commercial of we're so great and aren't you smart for calling us and blah, blah, blah. Don't fill it with too much of that. Auto attendants are famous for being inconsiderate of the caller's time and or patience. It's shorter than you think it is. Think about the last time that you had to carve out time to actually call a company. I actually hate talking on the phone. It's kind of ironic. I really hate phoning any kind of a company. And so, time is important, and so is patience. So always keep that in mind, that phoning is probably not people's preferred mode of contacting a company. And the other reality is that IVR is boring. Let's just say it. So, yes, things are changing, Mr. Wall Street. So it's time to add to the scrap heap, for recycling, of course, and get current. I had that actual Walkman. I love that thing. And it's time to make way for new trends in communication. I loved my pager too. Gosh, I felt empowered with that. So we're hipsters now, okay? Let's just admit it. We collaborate joyfully in repurposed office buildings with exposed brick. This is a bygone office, although this looks very much like my office at home, right? Right, honey? Yeah, yeah. It's got vintage phones and everything. This is in a museum, as you can see. This is the modern office now, and of course you have to take a photo from above, and you have to have ornamental cacti. But seriously, this is a corporation now. This is exactly the sort of people that order an IVR, and for which the traditional IVR will not be suitable. So that one-size-fits-all approach to IVR has really never been appropriate. There are people that produce IVR scripts and they say, oh, you're an insurance company? Use this script. You're a pet store? Use this. That one-size-fits-all approach is really not appropriate, and it has, it's no more a truism than it is now. So the stodgy, banal IVR is not going to represent most companies out there, and small enterprises, self-starters, entrepreneurs tell the story of our workforce as much as conglomerates do. So being formulaic, stuffy, and corporate is out even for corporations, and corporations look more like this now. Forming a brand and an identity through your IVR, I'm going to say that again, a brand and an identity through the IVR. People spend so much money formulating an identity through their websites, through their printed materials. If a company buys media, if they advertise on radio and TV, so much thought goes into forming their corporate brand, and the IVR gets left behind. So It is the first step. It's the entry point for people to make a decision about what the corporate brand is. And it assures your clients that they're a good fit with whom they're transacting. As a side note, anybody who does PowerPoint, do you ever write notes to yourself in the notes section and have no idea what they mean? I wrote, tell mortuary story. What does that mean? Oh, wait, I know what it is. Okay, so I did an IVR for a huge chain of funeral homes, and so I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be somber and this is going to be really depressing. Well, no, they're trying to actually target younger clientele, and so it was, you know, as hip as it could be talking about death, but they're complimenting the youngsters on how they're planning for everything and nothing's getting by them, and they're anticipating everything in their life. They're saving, they're buying houses, and that, you know, planning for a funeral is just another part of your investment portfolio and something that you get a gold star for getting that all sorted out before the time. So, bless her heart, the receptionist, IVR is not just to answer the phone. And it's not just a traffic cop. My God, that's a large moth or whatever that is. Wow. It's not just a traffic cop either. Its job is not simply to just direct callers to different places. It is the initial handshake, and it establishes what it's going to be like for end users to do business with you. So now, instead of this, do this. I'm kidding. It's too late. Yeah. Too soon? Okay. So yes, instead of this, do that H&R Block thing in which they're injecting some personality, and it's not that awkward greeting. The greeting makes sense to the caller. It invites them, and it's memorable. Let's think about that idea of perhaps somebody going, you know what, I called the tax office, and their phone system was hilarious. It actually made me feel like I'm not a disorganized loser. So yeah, instead of that whole awkward greeting, do that. Instead of the great, big, huge commercial that wastes people's time with too much, we're this, we're that, we're the other thing, do something that is efficient and truncated and tells the story of what you do, and especially if you're offering things like support and people are calling with a critical issue, impart that in the message that you are actually sensitive to the idea that they need service sooner than later. And of course, you know, limit those choices to under 5. Instead of setting up a system that is absolutely impossible to navigate through, and that when they reach a live agent, it feels almost like they won a contest of some sort. 5 options in an opening greeting max. 3 in a sub-menu, if you have to have a sub-menu. I'm not a big fan. I don't think you have that much staff that has that kind of specialized skills that you need a main menu of an IVR, and then you need to send them to drill deeper into a sub-menu or numerous sub-menus. I hate it when it's, you know, press 2 for accounting, and when you've pressed 2 for this kind of accounting, for that kind of, like, it's too fine-tuned, and you're expecting the caller to do way too much work. So I'm not a fan of sub-menus, and I urge people never to do more than 1 layer of sub-menus, if that makes sense. I hope so. And instead of being intimidated and afraid to do something a little bit unconventional, do what this chain of greenhouses did. They're acknowledging the idea that people who would call a greenhouse likely are not expert horticulturists, right? These are people who are like me every year. I want to plant stuff and I want it not to die, and I never seem to know what to plant where. And I'm probably typical of most people that would call in. So acknowledge why people would be calling in and address that whole issue rather than just sorting them. So you guys who work with telephone systems and are installers and implementers and perhaps resellers, you have a unique opportunity, much like Alana McFarlane, climbing up a pole. So you have the opportunity when working with your customers and end users to emphasize the importance of your customer's phone system being used to establish their brand to their callers. I never voice anything unless I go to their website and I see exactly what they're about. I've made mistakes of going, oh, this is a bank. Banks are serious. It needs to be stodgy and it needs to be very straightforward and very serious. Well, a lot of banks are doing both media and in their IVR are trying to demystify money. They're trying to take the fright out of investing. So even if you're fairly sure that you're understanding their industry, you need to understand your end user's position in the industry. You also have the opportunity to educate them on the importance of using their IVR for more than just sorting callers. And if you've ever heard the old advertising axiom of sell the problem, not the product, again, with the IVR, try to determine exactly who it is that's calling them, who is most apt to be calling them. If it's, a skincare rejuvenation spa, it's probably going to be women my age that want a little zhuzhing. And so I actually produced an IVR demo for a colleague of mine, a male colleague. He's got one of those deep, he's literally the truck and tractor event voice. He's like, yeah. So I had him do an IVR for a spa, which is not a product that he would be picked for. And I said, do it like Barry White. So he's like, oh girl, have you called the right place? And it was fantastic. Every time I hear it, it gives me chills. And I just think if I called in, I'd go, you've got my business. So sell the problem, not the product. So how do you educate your customers and end users about the importance of doing this? So urge them to abandon all the old, tired phrases. You know the ones. Thank you for calling. Please listen to all of our options before making your selection. No, nobody cares that you just changed your phone system and the options are different unless they call in all the time and they just automatically press the thing that they pressed the last time. There's many, many of them that people put in their system because we hear them all the time and we think they need to be in there. Have a strong understanding of what your client's company and position in their industry is all about. And encourage them to use their IVR to set the tone and establish exactly what it will be like for clients and customers to deal with them. What's the flavor of their company? That should be imparted through the IVR. The other thing that I talk to a lot of resellers about is the idea that they will mention having their IVR professionally recorded and professionally written. And they seem to think that it's an adjunct. It's whipped cream on top of the whole paradigm, and it's kind of a frill, and it's not necessary. And yet, it is their front door to their company. It is the gateway into the company. So, yeah, the IVR done perfectly is not a frill or the whipped cream. I always use the analogy that you wouldn't go to Home Depot and buy tile without also buying grout. It would be irresponsible for them to sell you tile without saying, well, you're going to need someone to kind of stick it all together. So it's amazing how many people get sold a system and it's installed and they're excited about getting it up and running, and they are left with the idea of, oh my gosh, who's going to voice the opening greeting and the close greeting and the menu and all that? So it's a really necessary thing to talk to them about and to have an understanding about that. So no more awkward greetings, no great big commercials, and no asking the callers to work harder than they need to. And the tough one really is just getting clients to unclench and introduce perhaps a little informality, a little humanity and humor into their system. So we're just not going to do those anymore. So yes, that's me in the 90s. Look at those bangs. God, that's terrible. So wow, I did finish early. This is crazy. So definitely visit my website. If you need custom recordings, I have business cards. You can also just send me a message at that email and connect with me on Twitter. And I do want to give a gigantic thanks to Dan for organizing this whole thing because, yes. He did an amazing job. So I want to hear from you. I want questions. I want observations about challenges that you've run into. Mr. Randy. I don't. Oh, anonymous man in the second row with a ball cap.
Is this on? Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yes.
And everybody maybe in the room even. And I'm going to give my answer to this question. And the question, you have elaborated a number of annoying things that people do,
Yep.
and that are amazingly still common today.
Yeah.
What is the most infuriating thing you've ever experienced? And I'm going to tell you mine. And it happens all the time.
Yeah.
You get the number on the website,
Yep.
you click or you make the call, and they go over every horrible thing like, thank you for calling. We know your time is important. Yeah, get to it.
Right.
And then our website contains all kinds of very rich
I've
That's
just
the worst.
been to the website.
That's
Yeah.
the worst. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
came from here.
Yeah.
Give me somebody, or even if it's a machine, give me the answer. Anybody else have any most infuriating
That's
that Allison didn't mention?
absolutely. Yeah. Those are
The IVR dead end.
the dead end. Yes.
You got somewhere and there's nothing to click and the options aren't there.
Right.
We give you 17 options and none of them is relevant.
Yes,
Right.
that's the thing. And you have that fear of choosing the wrong thing, because if you do and speak to a live agent going, oh, no, that's more of a marketing thing, I'm going to put you through. It's like, no, I finally got through to you. So yes, also sometimes the IVR can give options that actually create worry within the callers. So if you have model blah, 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 and it's blown up, please press 2. Like there's a lot of support lines that I voice, and I just go, wow, my confidence in this product is completely blown now, because there's a lot that can go wrong. Yeah. Jared.
My favorite is when they ask you for an account number, and you type it in the IVR, and then
Yeah.
the agent answers, and the first thing they ask you is for your
Oh.
account number.
My bank asks for my PIN number several different times. They want you to manually input it into the touch tone, and then the agent will also ask you to verify it while she's there. Oh, God, it's awful. Yeah. Mira.
Hey, it was an awesome presentation.
Thank you,
for
babe.
presenting.
Wish it was
Thank you,
longer,
Ben,
but-
for having Alison.
Yes.
At Zyper, we're terrible with IVRs, but anyway, that's not the topic. I have a question.
Yes. Yes.
What would you say to clients who are using their IVRs to spread out their calls in their call center in the proper queues?
In the proper queues?
Yes,
Yeah.
because you mentioned that you're against the submenus, but some call centers are using them to actually properly spread around the load on the queues.
I totally get that, yes. And I think especially if it's a large call center, yeah, you're going to have probably numerous layers of options. Although, so you're saying that once a caller chooses something and there is no agent to take them, they revert back into perhaps a submenu to, yeah, I'm not quite understanding.
No, the question was, when you have enough options
Yes,
and you have, well, I don't particularly know whether this is how it works. This is what I'm asking.
right,
You would have certain options, and there would be dedicated agents to this particular.
sure, yeah,
And then probably if no other agent is available, if it's a relatively mid-sized or small call center, they will be diverted to a different agent.
right.
Would a submenu actually aid this process?
Yes, it can and it does. So at the initial stage, when somebody calls in, they select an option and hopefully they get routed to, and especially if it's a large call center, there's going to be various agents that handle a great number of different departments. When I designed that slide, I was thinking primarily about just a typical company, a typical sized company that probably doesn't need to fine sort IVR. What I've known with call center prompts is that they're very good about designing fail-safe options. So they're sensitive. The good ones are sensitive to the idea that somebody's waiting, and they will give you an option to either stay in the queue with a keyed-in number, and it's a callback system. Something like that. Very seldom are people offered a different choice once they're in that initial queue, unless somebody else has more call center experience and can speak to that. That's kind of what I've experienced, is that you go through that one layer, you make your choice, and hopefully, if you're not being helped, hopefully somebody comes and, gives you an option of what to do. Yes. I was calling KitchenAid Canada for help with my little pasta attachment, made it through the whole thing, thought I was choosing housewares, which is, I don't know. Anyhow, I made it to the end. If you're calling about the KitchenAid pasta attachment, we no longer service that item. And it's like, yeah, no, so it happens to me too. Alan, did you have a question? Oh, and here we have Tori.
So it was kind of touched on before, but it's the thing that it seems like it always happens to me, and maybe it's just me, or maybe I'm not the only one, is every time there's an IVR, I go and listen for the list.
Yes.
And then I say, like, I don't know which one to pick. Either, like, is it service or maintenance? I don't know. Or maybe I go, well, none of them really match. What do I do now? And I'm just sitting there confused. Have you had this experience?
And pray, yes. Yeah, no, I think we've all run into that, and that can be changed and hopefully circumvented by good writing of the IVR. Determine which are the most common things that people will call in about. Front stack those according to importance, and that's a really, really good thing. So if you offer emergency support, put that at the very top, or put the choices that people are most apt to select at the very top and have it trickle down in importance. But you're right, you have that danger of choosing an option that isn't appropriate, and you're going to end up being sent back through the whole thing. I always tell this example. I did the IVR for a cardiology clinic in Florida, and they had 12 options, which is way too many. And the very last choice was, if this is a medical emergency, hang up and dial 911. Yeah, that was the very last choice. So I said, let's just put that one up front, and in case people are dying, and it's crazy. Yeah.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about is, tell us how you produce these prompts and how do you clean them all up and then deliver them?
Such a good question. Okay, so I have a little home studio. I record them there, and I do sound editing, and that's really not what my background is. I've just sort of learned how to do it as I go along. Typically what I'll do is produce a high resolution set and a low res. So the high res is really archival. It's for you to keep, in your collection, and to, it's sort of a listening copy. The 16-bit 8,000 hertz set is sort of the standard telephony that I send off to people. If people require, little unusual things like ULAW or ALAW, which is European telephony standard. So I can do that. There's like, OGG Vorbis, whatever that is. I was asked for that. So, but generally, yeah, they're digital, and I upload them onto an FTP. It stays there for a while, a secure FTP, of course. And yeah, so that's pretty much the process. I edit out all breathing noises and all mistakes and stuff like that. My least favorite thing these days are the clients that kind of hang over me and want to micro-direct me. So I did one system recently, and the guy wrote back with a page of notes. Could you go up on this word, and could you go softer on that word? And don't hire a creative professional and stand over them. Give them some idea of what you're looking for, and then back away and let them do their thing. Yeah, yeah. Hi, Laura.
Hello.
Oh.
I appreciate you saying no more than 5 options, but
yeah.
Once we set up an IVR for a swimming pool
Yeah.
to give opening times, so obviously days of the week there was 7, so it made sense to have 7 options.
Sure.
Well, in fact, there was 8 options, because the last option was, if you need anything else, press 0. So obviously 1 was for Monday, 2 was for Tuesday, and obviously if you could think about it and you wanted to know Friday, you press 5.
Yeah.
But can you give me some guidance on this? Because people were still pressing 0 and asking,
I
what's
know.
the opening times? It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because people now know that almost all systems will allow you just to press 0. And in fact, I tell people when they find out what I do for a living, they go, "Oh God, I hate those systems." And I go, "Yeah, I know, I do too." And I always say, just press 0. So I actually encourage people to do that. There are some systems, though, that will actually send you back through the queue at 0. So I understand perhaps maybe some IVRs need to be longer than 5 prompts, so I'll grant you permission. But just don't make a habit of having too many prompts. And also, it depends on how your system is configured, but if you have people pressing option 20 and you don't have the star or asterisk option at the end of each choice, they're just going to go to option 2 unless you have it configured in such a way that it can accommodate a double-digit extension. Does that make sense? Yeah, yeah. So who was it? Greg Bainline, an old asterisker? He did a traditional IVR, but then one of the options was press 6 for a cold beer. And he tracked how many people went, 6, give me beer. Yeah. Does that answer your question? I don't know. Okay. We have more? Oh, hi.
Hi, yeah. So this is about the you being out of the job, for example. Like, for example, I've been with the bank here called First Direct since in the 90's, actually, 20 years ago. They are a phone bank. So what they did was they promised never to use IVR. And it's true. Every time I call them in the past 20 years, they always answer in the first ring.
Wow.
So basically, they set up a call center, right? So that's one. So you don't need an IVR for that if you have a proper call center. And the second was actually now in 2018, as Evan was saying this morning, the text-to-speech, for example, is not quite almost your voice.
Right.
Or it can mimic your voice.
Yep.
And that means no one has to call you. They just have a script and then just put it to a machine.
Actually, when I first recorded the Capstrol text-to-speech application, when was that? 2006, 8? Around, yeah. People were saying, oh, you're going to just put yourself out of business. And I did have some concerns about that, but even though the corpus that they had me read, and it looked like a moderate telephone book of sentences, nonsensical sentences, Jane went and grabbed her red raincoat, and from that they can break it down into phonemes and subphonemes. And so they had me read a very large corpus just to capture more sounds. Now, despite that, Jared Smith and I always joke about this. When they debuted it at Astracon, they typed in, "Hi, I'm Allison Smith." And I said, "Hi, I'm Allison Smith." Like for some reason, they did not capture the sound in Smith, which strikes me as odd. To answer your question, it's good as an interstitial fill-in for little tiny things that are missing. It's not meant for the long haul at all. In fact, a client of mine sent me a sound file. I think I still have it. It's an on-hold segment, so 7 paragraphs, music mixed behind it, all built on Allison Capstrol. And it's hilarious because as good as it is, you can always tell that it wasn't recorded organically. Yeah. So, I've had a few people tell me, oh, your days are numbered in IVR, but there's good text to speech, and I'm not too concerned. I think the human voice is something that they can emulate pretty well, but not entirely accurately. Yes.
Can you tell the story? Tell the story about how you argue with yourself.
Yeah. So I've gotten a few automated calls from me. So I was staying at a hotel in Dallas. It could have been actually Astracon in Dallas, and I ordered a hotel wake-up call, and it was me waking me up. So that was odd. And then I always tell the story about Pete. He used to use the BlackBerry, and he downloaded a workout program called Endomondo. So it's kind of a coach to keep you honest at the gym and keep you motivated. And the first time he used it, he came home and he had this look on his face like I'd done something wrong. And I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Guess who's the voice of Endomondo?" So they were using Capstrol. So it's me saying, 5 more sit-ups. Come on, you can do it. Yeah, so I think he changed it to the Australian male because he gets enough of me at home. Yeah. And, we've had automated calls from our local cable provider to let us know that there's going to be drilling in the area and the cable was going to be out. And it was me actually giving me that message. So it's very trippy. Yes. Hi, Laura. Yeah. Oh, we on? There
Thank
we
you.
go.
There's a tricky question with our very own IVR at Zipgate because we have some low-cost products for private people, and one of the reasons why they are low-cost is because they only have email support. But we have some hotline guys in our office which are there for the cloud PBX, for the business stuff. And of course, also the private people can Google up the number for the business hotline.
Sure.
And then we for years now, we try to find a friendly way to filter them out.
Yeah.
We just tried to answer the calls, but that didn't work out quite well. So
Right.
we have to filter them out in the IVR somehow.
Yeah.
And it's quite tricky, yeah.
It is. It is. And actually, I like the failure prompts that go, I didn't quite hear you. Let's try again. They're kind of endearing the first time you hear them, but if a customer's really having trouble doing this whole turnkey thing, and listen, people that are turnkey, they actually probably want to handle most problems by themselves. So, if they get those prompts that are like, I think maybe we need to transfer you to a live agent, they're fun, but if the customer's really struggling, it creates a problem. So it'd be great if customers could just do it turnkey and look after themselves. Oh, I end in 000. I'm done. Okay, Mr. Smith.
Apparently I'm not.
Smith.
Why do you think of so many questions when there's no time there?
It uses up all the time that I didn't use up.
Well,
I
there you
feel
go.
happy.
That's good. Let's. When you're actually doing all your recordings here, how many times do you find yourself repeating things, going over, changing the inflection on things, maybe re-recording, maybe editing in different little bits?
It's interesting. I do voiceover workshops for yoga teachers, and I actually work with bar instructors. You know what bar is? It's like a ballet workout. So I was talking to the bar instructors about how they can see their body in a mirror, and they have this sort of detachment about looking at their body. They're not going, oh my God, I look like that. They're looking at their body and going, okay, that's bad alignment. Like, it's very scientific. I'm kind of like that about my voice. So I can listen to myself recording and go, that take was awful, and just redo it. To answer your question, I actually don't go back and redo things often, but I have such a detached critical ear that I can go, no, that has to be redone. You sort of bottomed out at the end of that prompt and it just sort of ended funny. Yeah, so I actually have that kind of detached view of my voice. And editing sound files, I have a very clear idea of which was a good take and not. I can just look at the waveform and go, that's overmodulated right there. Yeah.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for Allison. If you want to learn more, catch her around lunch or
Catch me.
later.
Thank you. Thanks very much.